good afternoon, everybody. Here it is, a wonderful Sunday afternoon in downtown Duncan, and in the neighborhood it appears it's a very sunny, beautiful day somehow. 9 degrees this morning. Waking up, I felt like putting a fire on, but it warmed up real quick. Now, all matters of fact, I'm going to have to take off this shirt when I go outside. But anyway, here we are doing another live broadcast, and today, again, it's the Storytellers. Now, the interesting part about storytelling is there's a guild in Victoria, there's a guild in Nanaimo, there's one in Qualicum, that's Parksville connected, right? Parksville. But like these are groups of people that get together and keep on the heritage of telling stories. And a lot of, you all might remember Aesop's fables. As a kid, I learned all those stories, and many years later, I'll go back and learn the lesson that was being taught. The little thing at the end that said, oh yeah, right, I get how they got to there, right? And it was a story that got a point across rather than just forcing you to understand. It creates a nice pathway so you educate yourself. And when you get to the end and the resolve, then you have an idea of how it came about. Storytelling is a wonderful thing. As I said, it's a very, I was going to say vocal. Of course it's vocal. Way of passing on history. And the First Nations use it a lot with totem poles, where they would keep the story going with the totem pole up so people would talk about it. And when that totem finally reached its time and fell down to the ground, by then the stories were impacted into the tribe and everybody knew them. So there's no need to resurrect that. It just went on. So oral tradition is huge. And the nice thing about the maritime style of storytelling, there's always humor. Always. So anyway, Lee Porteous is here again today. She's the one that helped organize this a couple years ago, and I've been enjoying each and every time of it. Hope you are too. I know by the number of views that we see, it's really cool. Now, you can be part of the live audience. We have some people today. So next time you hear about this coming on, make sure you show up and hear good storytelling. Lee, it's up over to you. Have some fun.
I'm Lee Porteous, and on behalf of the Storytellers on Vancouver Island, want to express our gratitude to Longevity John for the opportunity to tell stories here in this wonderful theater that he has created, and to Ted Cadillac for making us heard and seen so well. Admission is by donation, whether you're online or in person. This is one of a series of storytelling events each month. Normally, we're the fourth Sunday, but I'm going to be in Alberta. They're going to teach me even how to tell better over there in Alberta. So Longevity John allowed us to come a week early. Your tellers will be storytellers from 3 adult storytelling groups on the island, the Victoria Storytellers Guild, the Around Town Tellers from Nanaimo, and the Mid-Island Storytellers from Parksville, Qualicum. We acknowledge with respect the Cowichan First Nation, the largest single First Nation in BC, on whose traditional territory this event is taking place, and whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. Welcome to all of you who are or will be joining us online, and those who are here today. For those of you here with us, please mute your phones. You'll have a chance to check them during our mid-show break, and also talk with the tellers, Ted and Longevity John, and each other. Our first teller is Janosch Varga. He came to storytelling with the idea he could learn to tell stories of the life of his family that his kids had probably forgotten and record them. Well, he has been telling here and elsewhere a lot of these stories, and not just limited to his life. And not only that, here he is being recorded. So he's gotten very, very close to his goal. Come on up, Janosch.
Hi, folks. Well, this story today is going to be set in South Africa, as so many of my stories are. And if you've listened to some of my previous ones, you'll remember that I talk about the Indian Ocean, the KwaZulu Natal state where the Zulu people live and where I was. And I talk about the subtropical climate, the gorgeous trees with flowers, the red flame tree, the green, blue jacaranda, the Oh, there's so many. And of course, the fruit. Everything you could imagine. We got the papaya, pawpaw, the passion fruit, pineapple, mango, guava, lychee. And it's so beautiful, provided you can get to them before the monkeys get them. And it's a beautiful coastline, the people exuberant, the Zulus are happy and colourful. And I usually talk of the thunderstorms that we have in January, February. Each afternoon, usually a downpour, and then an hour or so later, the sky clears and white clouds are skitting by. Now, this time, I'm not going to talk of white clouds. I'm going to talk of dark clouds, because this was a really bad time for me. I had left IBM and opened a shoe shop. Now you may wonder why, after so many years in the computer business, you decide to open a shoe shop. Well, I have these crazy ideas, and I wanted my own business. That was the idea. And so I opened a shoe shop, and it's going well. It becomes a shoe business. The idea is I have thousands of pairs, and I display a huge number. And people come in, and I buy end of production lines, odd excess pairages that they've made, and there's always shoes to be had from shoe factories in various states. And so I opened this business, and it was going well. I had hundreds of display units and 1,000 pairs on display all the time. And I'm going really well. And a couple of years into this, Durban municipality come to me and say, you're not supposed to be retailing from this location. What? There was a retail shop here before. Well, perhaps there was, but you're not supposed to be retailing, and therefore we're going to fine you every single day that you're open. A large amount, I forget what it was. Well, you can go to arbitration, you can question it, and we set a date to go to Pietermaritzburg and go to court, but we're going to fine you each day, and if you are found that you are guilty, you should not have been, we are right, you will have to repay all that money every day that we fine you. Wow. And a few weeks later, my landlord comes. And he smokes a fat cigar and he slouches in my chair. And of course, he says, I'm going to increase your rent by 50% at the end of your lease. Now, this is a double whammy. No business can manage, to operate under a cloud, thinking what happens if I lose, and no business can manage to absorb 50% rental costs. I don't know what to do. I don't think anyone, I don't know. What would you do? So I didn't want to answer my phone. I didn't. Some days I would weep driving into work. I want to crawl under my desk. I don't know what to do. I'm really lost. And I owe a huge amount of money because what factories do, you buy shoes from them, 3 months later, it's due for payment. Now, unless you sell at a reasonable markup, you don't have that sort of cash. And I need to fold up the business. I can't operate. What am I going to do? Do you believe in angels? Mm-hmm. Well, I don't. Let me correct myself. I didn't. Because one day, this guy walks in. He's from Cape Town, 1,000 k's away, or 2,000 or 5,000 k's away. And he's a factory owner, and he says, you owe me money, I've come to collect. Because I don't answer the phone anymore. And he sees the state I'm in. I explain to him what's happening. And I remember to this day, he kind of wore this cloak. And he whips the cloak off, hangs it up behind my door. He says, I'm also an accountant. Tell me everything. So he sits down, and for next hour or 2 hours, I tell him what I owe to which factory, when it's due, what pairage is, what I have in stock. And he goes through one by one and he says, and he's been in the business many years, he says, oh, pay that factory because they'll take you to court very soon. Don't pay that one, give him a little bit. And he goes through each of my debtors and tells me what to do. And now listen, what he says at the end is the gobsmacker. He says, don't pay me, I can wait. And he gave me the formula for getting out of this huge debt. Full page advert, huge sales, he told me everything, and I pulled out. Honestly, he was an angel. But a year of being ground down had reduced me. It really made me, I don't know if you have felt anything like that yourselves. You know, you want to get your mojo back. You want to build yourself up again, because I've been ground down. And I thought, if I do something really dangerous, really, I'll get my power back. And there's a coastline not far from Durban. It's called the Wild Coast. It's the bottom of Transkei, which is an independent kingdom within South Africa. And there's nothing there. There are no roads, no bridges, no electricity. It's wilderness. And I thought I'd go from Port Edward to Port St. John's. It's 100k. I estimated 15k a day. Most of the walking is on beach, which is not easy, and close to the shore. And I said, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do it solo, which is a little bit dangerous. But I packed, and in those days, it's about 30, 40 years ago, there were no freeze-dried fruits, not where we were in South Africa. So I took loaves of bread. Imagine 3 full loaves of bread, 7 tins of sardines, and the sardines were heavy tins in those days, not like the light one. My pack was heavy. I had a circumference perimeter, a tripwire if people come, because they can rob you on these places, and so on. I think it was more than a third of my body weight. So it was really heavy. Anyway, I set off. And I'm doing well. The thing to watch out for are the rivers, because there are no bridges. At every river, I would have to undress, split my pack, make a raft, put half my gear on, swim across the river, and then come back for my other half of the gear. Of course, what didn't help is knowing that sharks often circle around the estuary of rivers. And I was thinking, me swimming there, my dangly bits, maybe look very delicious to the shark, but I'm intact. So they didn't go for me. The other thing was snakes. It's a problem. I didn't carry snake serum. I mean, really, even to identify, there's different snake serums are for different snake types. Is it a front fang, back fang? Is it a spitting cobra? And then one day, I'm coming up really fast because I'm falling behind. I'm not doing my 15Ks. I'm coming really fast. I remember coming up this slope, and within a foot of me, as I come up the slope, there's a big fat snake in the morning warming itself on the rock. Well, talk about being frightened. Yes, I was, but luckily for me, that snake was also frightened. And it was fat, and he whipped off the other direction. Now, I was lucky it wasn't a puff adder. Puff adders are lazy. They wouldn't move. They would have rather struck me than move away. And then one day, I'm going around, and there's no maps. This is before internet. I don't have any contact with the outside world. And there's a hill, around that hill. I think sheep would have been grazing there. And there's what seems to be a path going round, disappearing round the side. So I take the path. Now, to my left, because the ocean's always to my left, because I'm going southwest, and the hill drops away about 20, 30 feet away. It drops into about 50 feet drop down to the rocks below. And the sea is pounding and so on. But the path is looking good, and I'm okay. I'm so intent on my walking on this path that I forget, and I don't check both to my left or to my right, because the hill gets steeper and steeper. And after a while, the path gets narrower and narrower. And at a certain point, I realize that I can touch the hill with my right arm. So it's so steep. And I look to my left, and only 10 feet away now, there's a sheer drop of 50 feet down to the ocean below. And there are rocks and pounding surf. And the path has disappeared. I thought even the sheep thought it was too dangerous to be there. And they stopped walking along this path. Now, the big problem is I have to turn round. I'm on this very steep slope and with a heavy pack which unbalances me. Well, a testament to me being able to turn round is the fact that I'm standing in front of you. And although I tell you, that was one of the riskiest points in my life. I had a few, but that one is one of them. And then I go further. I'm maybe, 5 days into my 7-day hike, and I get into this thorn forest. Now, a thorn forest are bushes. They're not actually trees, but the thorns can be 6 inches. It's impossible to go through a thorn bush. And there's a whole load of them surrounding me this way and that way. And I'm trying to get out, and I can't. I know roughly where I'm supposed to be going, but I can't find my way out of this forest. And then I hear voices. I think, okay, maybe some of the locals are here. And I go round, and there they are, 2 Xhosa men. And they're big. I look up, and one of them has a knobkerrie. A knobkerrie in South Africa is a branch that's been fashioned out where there's a joint of many branches coming in. It's been rounded. It's a club. And the other one has a similar branch with a big industrial metal nut screwed on the end. And I ask them, which way do I go? And they pretend not to understand me. Now, in South Africa, everyone speaks English or Afrikaans, probably both. There's no grown person who doesn't speak one of those 2 languages beside their own local dialect. And I'm watching them, and then they're tapping their things, looking at me, talking among themselves, and I think, I'm in deep trouble. They're thinking of robbing me. Now, what do? I don't actually know the way out. And I thought, what I'll do is I'll saunter away, very gently start backing out before they know what's happening. I got to turn and go the opposite direction. And I had a plastic gun. The gun looked like a normal gun, and it looked very lifelike. And I knew exactly which part of my pack it is. So that's what I did. I started going away and then turn and go, and they go, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I drop my pack, open the thing, and I pretend to cock the gun. Whoa, oh, of course. That's like from the frying pan into the fire, because now they want the gun. The most desirable thing in South Africa is a gun. So now I'm safe for the time being, but I've got to get away. And that's what I do. And I really put on a spurt. I go fast, I go left, right, whatever it is. I manage to get out of the thorn forest. They're not behind me. But now it's afternoon. This was in the afternoon. And tonight, they're going to be looking for me. So I got to try, and I did. I went as fast as I could, and I was weaving in and out. I didn't go on the beach as I usually camp. I went in, and I found another thorn scrub, and I had a machete, and I chopped the thorns down, the bushes, and I made a corral and dragged them in. So all the thorns were facing out. And that night I didn't sleep. That night I stayed awake and listened, and no one came. So all was well. And I did get to Port St. John's, and it was 7 days. And boy, I was hungry when I got there. And there was a smorgasbord at St. John's Hotel. And I tell you, they didn't make any money out of me that day. It was a seafood smorgasbord with oh man, I ate. And did I get my mojo back? Yes, I did. And if you were to ask me, what did I get out? What wisdom did I get out of all this? Never to have your own business. Never again. No, I vowed never to do that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Janos. I guess it's always true that the human beings are more dangerous than the snakes. And there are angels in our lives. Don't always recognize them, but sometimes you can. So our next teller is Moira Walker. She arrived in Victoria in 1983, not intending to stay. In fall of 2008, she accompanied a work colleague to an event at which her friend had been asked to tell a story. At the event, members of the audience were asked to tell a story, and Moira stepped forth. Very brave, I think. Jennifer Ferris, who's been on this stage before too, was in attendance, and hearing her story, she encouraged Moira to come to the Victoria Storytellers Guild. A few months later, in the spring of 2009, she did. By coincidence, that was the summer that the Guild held the National Storytellers Conference at UVic, which she was able to attend and hear stories from and hobnob with storytellers from all over Canada. And it must have taken, because she's still telling stories, and she's here to give you one today. Thank you, Moira.
All right, I'm not too, this seems a bit high
You just
for me.
pull it down, just muscle it
Like,
down.
muscle it down like that. Yeah, seems a bit. Will that do? Yeah. Okay. I'm here to replace Jennifer Ferris. So, of those of you who wanted to hear her, I'm afraid you've got me instead. And when Lee asked me a few days ago, she requested that I tell you my Ricardo story. As she mentioned, I've been telling stories. I guess my first one was in 2008, and since then, and this Ricardo story seemed to be my greatest hit. Sometimes people come out of the woodwork and just say Ricardo to me. However, I'm sorry, Lee, but I decided I couldn't tell my Ricardo story today. I just couldn't. And instead, I'm telling you a story that I have recently written, and I'm telling on Monday night at the Guild. So if it's a bit rough, it's because it's still in progress. And so instead of going to Mexico with me, you're going to go to the Soviet Union. Before I start the story, I just want to say, because this is being recorded, that I'm wearing the ribbons of Ukraine, and I'm also wearing a necklace, and I have a silk scarf with me. So those are some of the things that are my props for this story. And I've just simply called it May 1986. Should I risk going to Leningrad? I asked Dr. Patel on the phone. Patel is an expert in low-level radiation. I wouldn't go if you're planning to have children, Dr. Patel tells me. 2 days earlier, on April 26, 1986, at the nuclear facility in Chernobyl, one of the reactors suffered a massive explosion and meltdown. Radiation was spewed into the atmosphere. My brother-in-law, who is a physicist at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, would begin to track the radiation as it circled the globe. A year before this event, the social justice group to which I belong, the Voice of Women, or VOW, had had a peace conference in Halifax, and we had invited 2 women from the Soviet Women's Peace Committee. The Conservative government of Brian Mulroney denied the women visas. Nevertheless, the following year, when the Soviet women had a conference, they extended an invitation to VOW, and I was selected as the delegate. I phoned Rosalie Patel because she was a member of VOW, lived in Toronto, was a Grey nun and a research scientist, and her expertise was in low-level radiation. She had immigrated to Canada not that long before I phoned her because she had been driving to testify against the building of some reactors in upstate New York, and her car had been run off the road. The person who did that to her was later traced to the U.S. State Department. Reactors are very serious things. In 1986, I was 36 and still had a hope that I might have a child. Nevertheless, I took the risk and I went to the Soviet Union to the peace conference. I'm glad I did. I left Victoria and flew to London, England, 2 weeks after the catastrophe. In London, I transferred to an Aeroflot plane that flew me to Leningrad. At the airport, a man was holding my name on a sign, and he was also holding a red rose, which he gave me. He drove me by car to an artist resort outside of Leningrad that was in a birch wood and beside the Baltic Sea. Down the hall from me was a regal, statuesque woman who I would learn was the cosmonaut Valentina Tereskova. Every night, members of the delegation crowded into a room to listen to the update on the state of Chernobyl. President Mikhail Gorbachev spoke every night on state TV. I speak no Russian, but one of the delegates translated for those of us who didn't speak the language. At the conference itself, articulate speakers from across Europe and the Soviet Union spoke. They shamed me with their knowledge of peace treaties, military stockpiles, and European history. In private, the Soviet women grilled me about Canadian literature and told me about their favorite American novels that they'd read. They also wanted to know what I thought about our former Prime Minister, Pierre Elliott Trudeau. It seems that nobody in the world didn't know about that man. The Soviet women struck me by their grace, their kindness, and their thoughtfulness. One of the women who spoke at the conference was from the German Democratic Republic, that is East Germany. She wept as she spoke about what Germany had done to the Soviet Union during World War II. A delegate from Georgia, USSR, gave me this pendant, pressing it into my hands. And later, Valentina Tereskova would give all the delegates a blue silk scarf. For those of you who are here, you can see it depicts the Earth from space. Valentina was the first woman in space, and she flew a solo mission in 1963. On the scarf, the Earth is covered with the word peace in multiple languages: Russian, German, English, French, Spanish. It seemed very fitting to me that a beautiful woman would give me a beautiful scarf. During the conference, we were taken to Leningrad, where we went to visit a cemetery where some of the 20 million Soviets who died during World War II are buried in mass graves. They're brown humps of earth. The cemetery is surrounded by trees, and from the trees were hanging speakers, out of which the music of Johann Sebastian Bach poured. As I stood looking at the cemetery, I watched as women approached. They were dressed in black and they wore headscarves that used to be so common in England in the 60s. They were all of them, or most of them, were carrying red roses, single red roses, which they bent and laid on the burial ground. It's useful to know that the color red in the Russian language is related to the word for beautiful. What else did we do in Leningrad? Sorry. I think that's... sorry. Oh, yes. We also visited the Hermitage, and because we were part of a group, we got to jump the queue. The queue was enormous to the entrance of this huge art gallery that is housed in a former palace of the Tsars. Once the conference was over, I travelled by train with another American delegate to Moscow, where I stayed for a week. She particularly wanted to visit a friend of hers, a Jewish woman who had immigrated from the US to the USSR, and she had some presents for her. So we went by subway to the apartment where the woman was living with a Soviet family. The apartment had 2 grand pianos in it. It turned out that the mother of the family, the Soviet family, was in fact a music teacher. Well, no sooner did she hear that I was from Canada that she bounced on me. "Why did Glenn Gould die at 50? She inquired. Well, I was sorry, but I had no idea why the Canadian pianist had died so young. While in Moscow, I went to visit Lenin's sister's apartment, which overlooks the Kremlin. The guide sat down at a piano and played for me a piece of music that Lenin was himself fond of playing, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. I stood in Red Square. At some point during that 2 weeks, I have to admit, I fell in love with the Russian language and the part of the Soviet Union that I saw. I know enough about Russia, the Soviet Union, to know that during World War II, it fought 80% of the Nazi army and was largely responsible for the defeat of fascism. I know, too, that the Soviet army was in late July 1945 just about to enter Japan. There are some historians who do not doubt why that was the reason that the U.S. decided to drop a uranium bomb on Hiroshima and a plutonium bomb on Nagasaki. 20 million, by the way, the number of Soviets killed during the war, was in fact the entire population of Canada during the 1940s. I know, though, too, that Stalin was a brute, and I know that Putin, a member of the Soviet KGB, is a violent thug. Nevertheless, when I returned to Canada and resumed my job at teaching at Camosun College, I inserted the Soviet-honored artist Yevgeny Yevtushenko into my course outline. I never had my students read that poet's work, but that I myself wasn't moved. Occasionally, I will switch on a YouTube video and watch the Soviet operatic baritone Dmitry Vorostovsky sing. Somehow, I lost my heart to the Soviet Union. I never did have a child, but sometimes when I'm a bit despondent, I remember that I once walked in a European birchwood on the side of the Baltic Sea, that I once was rocked asleep on a train that went from Leningrad to Moscow, and that on awakening in that train I was served in China tea that had been poured from a samovar. So I say to the Soviet people I met and to the part of the Soviet Union that I saw, Pasipo, thank you.
I don't want to break it, Ted. It's got a droop. So, just deciding which of my stories to tell you today first. And I'm thinking, we'll do the big one first. And this one is from Tajikistan. And Bob Barton, who's a storyteller from Ontario, had edited it and put it in his collection, and that's how it came to me. The name of the story is... How can I forget the name? We were just talking about it. My nouns have fled. It's Farishta Mo, the longed-for lady. There was once a Padishah, a leader, who celebrated the birth of his firstborn son by sending out a proclamation that if there were any other babies born in his kingdom at the hour that his firstborn son was born, he would bring to the palace and raise and educate them. And it happened there was such a child. It was the son of a poor shepherd. And true to his word, the Padishah brought that baby to the palace, and he raised and educated that boy. In fact, the two boys, the prince and the shepherd's son, grew up together, and they played together, they went to school together, and they became best friends. In their early manhood, they were coming home from hunting when the prince very foolishly shot at a chicken and wounded it and chased it right into the farmyard where there was a woman, an old woman, because us old women are so smart and clever and talented, was at her loom. And the terrified chicken flew up onto the fabric and tore the warp and bloodied the weaving. The old woman was furious. She stood up and she said to him, "You have ruined hours of my work. I curse you with love for Farishta Mo." "Who is Farishta Mo?" said the prince. "Ah, she is a princess in the land of the setting sun. Everyone who looks upon her falls in love with her, but she has not wed anyone. To get to that land, you have to go over 7 high mountains." Well, on the way back to the palace, the prince was tormented with the thoughts of the curse that this old woman had laid on him. And he realized he had to go there. He had to go and see Farishta Mo for himself. So when he got back, he went to his father and asked his father for permission to travel to the land of the setting sun. Well, the Padishah was uneasy about this. He was getting older. It was time that his son learned how to take over the reins when he became Padishah. But, for better or for worse, he agreed that his son could go there on the condition that the shepherd's son go too. So the two men set off, and they rode, and they rode, and they rode, and they met and went over every one of those 7 mountains. And then finally, late in one evening, they came out of a valley to a town. They knocked on the first gate they came to, and little old women play a lot of roles in our stories. Anyway, she came bustling out, and the prince said to her, "We are tired and hungry. Would you have any place that we two could lay our heads tonight?" And she said, Oh, I'm so sorry. I only have a small room. The room is so small that if I'm in that room and my head is in the room, my feet are outside. And if my feet are inside, my head is outside." Well, the prince reached into his pouch and he pulled out a golden sovereign and he flipped it to her. She caught it neatly out of the air and she said, "Ah, but I have another room that's much more roomy, and you'd be welcome to stay there as long as you like." And so they followed her, and she laid down cushions, and she put a fresh tablecloth on the table, and she served them tea and girdle cakes. And as the meal was ending, she asked them, "Well, boys, why are you here?" And the shepherd's son said, "Well, we have come all this way because we want an audience with the Princess Farishta. My brother is already half in love with her." The old woman looked sad. She said, "Well, many princes and sons of viziers have come and tried to get an audience with her just to gaze upon her, but none have succeeded. Do you think you will be able to?" The prince said, "We will succeed. We will get an audience with her." "Ah," said the old woman, "she will set you a difficult problem. If you can solve it, she will marry you, but otherwise she will not meet with you." "Well, then, I will solve the difficult problem," said the prince. Well, the two men talked that night, and they decided that the next day the prince would go on his own to the palace of Farishta, and the shepherd's son would wait for him and the results. And so the next day, the prince rode through the gullies and over the rocks and such to get to the palace. And when he got there, he was shown into a large chamber, and there was a screen in the front of that chamber. From behind the screen came a young woman's voice. And she said, "Well, why are you here?" "I'm here for an audience with you." She said, "Well, the rules are this. I will set you a difficult problem. If you can find the solution, I will marry you." "I'm ready to start it right now." She said, "Well, tonight, when it's time for us to retire for the night, you will be taken to my chamber. You will be seated in a chair behind a curtain. I will come into the room and lay down on my bed. Your task is to keep me from falling asleep all night through. But you must stay seated in that chair. You cannot shout or clap or stamp your feet or make too much excessive movement. And if you succeed, I will marry you." So, when the time came, the prince was taken into the chamber, sat in a chair in front of the curtain, and the princess came in, sat on her bed. Well, no matter what he did, he could not keep her awake. He exerted so much effort that he himself fell asleep, and in the morning he had to be shaken awake and told that he had lost the competition. He was inconsolable. He went back and he told the shepherd's son what had happened, and no matter what the shepherd's son had said, he was not willing to be consoled either. So the shepherd's son said, "Well, how about I'll go and try my hand at it, and after that, let's see what happens." And so the prince agreed. So what the shepherd's son did is he spent the next number of hours carving a piece of wood into a wooden doll, and then he set out for the palace. When he arrived there, he proclaimed that he wished to take on this challenge as well, and he was seated behind the curtain. He waited till he could hear Farishta come into the room, and then he immediately held up the doll, and he said, "My friend, I have always admired your good sense and your intuition, And now I need you to help me. I have a number of riddles that have been troubling me. Would you apply your good sense to this and help me with them?" "Yes," he said in a high, squeaky voice for his doll. "Yes. What are the riddles? Tell me." Well, Farish was intrigued by the squeaky high voice and also with the prospect of riddles to be solved. "My friend," said the shepherd's son, "there was once a soothsayer and a great doctor who lived in the same town. The soothsayer, with his scrying, discovered that the Pharaoh in Egypt had a daughter who was very ill. And he said to the doctor, this is the soothsayer, the Pharaoh is willing to give a great fortune to anyone who can cure his daughter. All of the doctors in Egypt and the nearby areas, none of them has succeeded, and she is still very ill." The doctor said, "Well, it's a pity. It's a pity because if we were closer, I could cure her in 3 days." Well, there happened to be a craftsman walking by who overheard this conversation, and he interjected and he said, "Gentlemen, I have just created a mechanical flying horse. We can get to Egypt in no time at all if we use the flying horse." No sooner said than done, and they were on their way. They got to Egypt, and true to what he had said before, the doctor was right. He managed to cure that girl in 3 days. Well, then the Pharaoh went to the doctor and was about to give him his reward when both the soothsayer and the craftsman objected. "No, no," they said. "No, no." Each one said, the soothsayer said, "I deserve that reward. If I had not been able to see that your daughter was in trouble, nothing could have been done." And the craftsman said, "No, no, it's me. Without the flying horse, the doctor would not have been able to be here." Well, a huge argument came of that, and the Pharaoh and his advisors, none of them could work out a suitable solution. So I'm asking you, my friend, who do you think should get the reward? Myself, I think the soothsayer should get the reward because without him nothing could have happened. Well, I believe that it's the craftsman. Without the craftsman, the doctor couldn't have been taken there and nothing could have happened either. Farish who had been paying attention to all of this, says, "No, no, both of you are wrong. It is the doctor who deserves the reward because the reward is for curing the patient, and that he is the only one who could do that, and he did." "Ah," said the shepherd's son, "the beautiful Farish is right. And my friend, now I have another story to tell you, and this time I want you to pay close attention and give a solution that the beautiful Farish will agree with." "Ready, I'm ready for the next one." And so the shepherd's son began the second story. "There was once a padishah," he said, "who had a nightingale he kept in a golden cage in a place in his garden. And every day at a certain time he would go to the garden and listen to this nightingale sing. One day, as he was out there in the garden, 2 other nightingales flew in and landed on his nightingale's cage, and there seemed to be a conversation going on among the nightingales. And then after a little while, the 2 nightingales flew away. The padishah went over to the cage and said to his nightingale, 'Who were those nightingales, and what were they talking to you about?' 'Oh,' said the nightingale, 'those birds were my relatives. The padishah of nightingales is having a great feast, and I am invited. But as I told them, I cannot leave this cage, so I cannot go.' And so they left." The padishah thought about that for a minute, and then he said to the nightingale, "If I let you go to this feast, what would you bring me back from the kingdom of the nightingales?" "I would bring you back an apricot seed, An apricot seed that, when planted, will, in 40 days, grow a tree to full maturity and loaded with fruit. Anyone who eats from this fruit will find their youth and vigor restored. Well, the Padishah agreed to that, and true to its word, the nightingale came back and brought an apricot seed. The Padishah himself planted that seed in the garden. And the tree did, in 40 days, grow to full maturity, and it was loaded with apricots. On the 41st day, the Padishah ordered his gardener to go and pick an apricot for him and bring it back. The gardener went to the tree, and he looked, and there were apricots on the ground, and he picked a right one from the ground and brought it back to the Padishah. The Padishah immediately handed it to an old man. The old man took a bite out of the apricot and fell down dead. Well, the Padishah was outraged. He ordered that the nightingale be beheaded, and his command was obeyed immediately without question. Now, word of the death-dealing apricot tree spread like wildfire around the town, and an old man who was tired of life crept into the garden, and he went to the tree, and he ate not just one, but 3 apricots. Then he sat down under the tree and awaited his fate. And he sat, and he sat, and he sat. And the longer that he sat, the better he felt. And so he reached up and to scratch his beard, but there was no beard. There was just his face. So he hopped up and he went over and looked into one of the ponds. And imagine how he felt looking into this pond and seeing himself as he was 50 years before. Well, the gardener came into the garden, and he thought that this was an intruder, a thief in the garden. So he had him arrested and taken in front of the Padishah. Well, everybody was astonished to hear this young man's story. And the Padishah said, well, how is it that the other apricot killed that old man? He died, and you have recaptured your youth and vitality, not even near dead. Well, what the Padishah and the gardener did not know is that when that apricot that the gardener had picked up was lying on the ground, a poisonous snake came and bit into that apricot. And that's what killed the old man. And so my question, my friend, is who is most responsible for the 2 deaths? Oh, said the doll. The one responsible is obviously the gardener. He should never have picked up a piece of fruit from the ground to give to his Padishah. No, it's the gardener who's fully responsible. Yes, said the shepherd's son, I agree with you. It is the gardener who is more at fault. Well, Farishta was rocking back and forth on her hands and her knees. She was so excited, and she said, oh, my friend, you tell wonderful stories, but your reasoning is weak. No, the person responsible for these deaths was the Padishah. What leader would hand over this apricot and immediately, without even checking it, have this old man eat it? And even more so, to not check before beheading that poor nightingale. No, the Padishah is the one responsible for both deaths. Ah, my friend, said the shepherd's son to his doll, the lovely Farishta is not happy with our decision here. And unless you can give better decisions next time, she's always going to think that I am a liar or a fool. So now, listen closely to the next story and give your best opinion. Carefully think about it, your best opinion, to answer the question. And so the son of the shepherd started his 3rd story. There once was a young man who lived in a village that beside a river, And this young man was the son of a cobbler. He was handsome, he was well-mannered, and hard-working. He was also in love with the daughter of the rich landowner who lived beside them. And she herself loved this young man too. And every night they met, and the more time they spent with each other, the deeper their love was for each other, and they could hardly bear to be apart. Across the river lived another wealthy man, and he decided that this girl, the son of the wealthy landowner, would make an excellent bride for his son. So he sent a message to her parents, and they accepted that, despite the young girl objecting and saying that she would not marry anyone that she did not love. Well, they didn't listen to her. And so on the morning of the wedding, she was terribly distraught, and she hid a dagger in her clothing. After the wedding and after the wedding feast and the guests had gone home, the bridegroom came to find his new wife, and he found her weeping and cowering in a corner. "Whatever's the matter?" he said to her. She took out the knife. "Stay away from me. Stay away. I love another, and I love him with all my heart. I did not want to marry you. Well, and I will never change my love for him." Well, the bridegroom was afraid that she might stab him, but maybe harm herself as well. So he said to her, "Go," he said, "go and be with the man that you love, and stay with him." So off she ran into the night. She ran down to the bridge that went across the river from their two places, and she stepped on that bridge, and as soon as she did, a thief stood there. He said, "What are you doing here? This is a place that's dangerous for grown men to be. No young woman should be in this place at this hour." Well, she began to weep even harder, and she poured out the whole story to him. He was so moved by her story that he took her and guided her where she wanted to go. And when she found the young man, she threw her arms around him, and she wept. "Now we're together. We'll be together forever now. Nothing will tear us apart." But the young man said, "I love you with all my heart, but I cannot go along with this because your father and the father of your husband are powerful men, and they will wreak a terrible vengeance on me and on my parents too. I would suffer anything for your love, but I cannot ask my parents to suffer as well. So I will never forget you. I will always love you, but you have to go back to your husband." And so she did, and she stayed with him thereafter. "And now the question that I have," said the son of the shepherd, "is who of the bride, the bridegroom, the cobbler's son, or the thief showed the most humanity in this situation?" Well, that's easy. It was the cobbler's son. He loved her, but he gave up his love for her for the sake of his parents and for the girl herself. It was him. He was the one. Well, I thought it was the thief, because the thief was a brutal man. But he was moved by her story, and he ended up helping her. Narrow-minded, said Farish to Mo. "Have you no consideration of the courage and the depth of love that young girl showed? She is the one that you should be saying is the most courageous here. She faced all kinds of danger, and to stay true to her true love. She is the one who displayed the most humanity. Well, the son of the shepherd said, yes, yes, I too was moved by her courage and her loyalty. And at that point, the sun came into the window and shone on Farishtamo's face. It was the dawn. The son of the shepherd had won. He had succeeded in the challenge. At that moment, the door flew open, and Farishtamo's parents and the servants and friends burst into the room and looked at her face. And she said, yes, he has succeeded. This young man has won this challenge. Now, my parents, I have never thought to look for wealth or title in searching for a bridegroom. I have always wanted to find a man that I considered the wisest and kindest to be my partner for life. And this young man used a clever way of telling these stories to keep me engaged in the whole evening, and he demonstrated his kindness and cleverness throughout. He is the one I would choose, but I would never force my choice on anyone else. So all the eyes in the room looked toward the shepherd's son, and he said, you are the most beautiful and the cleverest woman I have ever heard. Don't let your choice fall upon me. You should choose the richest and most titled of any of your suitors. I am just the son of a shepherd, and I was here also to try my powers on behalf of my friend, the prince, whose father raised and educated me. Farishtamo said, see there, my parents, what a kind and thoughtful person this is. No, he is my choice, but I will not, of course, force my choice on anyone else. At that moment, the son of the shepherd beamed from ear to ear because he knew in truth that he himself had been chosen as he was. And so messengers went out and announced that Farishtamo had chosen a bridegroom, and all her people celebrated that at last Farishtamo had found the one that she wished to spend her life with. So that was a package deal. 4 tales in one. So I have a few announcements, and that is tomorrow, September 16th, Monday, the Victoria Storytellers Guild has its monthly meeting, and it's beginning. We've had a break through the summer. We've had some stories in our gardens, and that you can attend in person or on Zoom. October the 11th, Friday at 7:30, Nanaimo's Around Town Tellers, in person or on Zoom, are having their storytelling, and the theme is It Was a Dark and Stormy Night. Seems to me that Snoopy was always writing a book about that. I guess the Around Town Tellers have found it and can tell you about it. October 27th at 2 p.m. is the next Duncan Showroom, and the topic will be Some Lightness in the Dark for that one. So now you have 10 minutes. Ooh, I went over time. Anyway, but you have 10 minutes anyway for a comfort break. So we'll see you back then. Bye now.
Bring your friends next.
And so we set sail to the sea on the back of a whale. Yes, she held our lives. She's a blade that glides through the tides. And she moves just like a ghost. In the mist, she continues to float. She showed her heart to so many men, so many men she'll never see again. Just for the moment, just for the day, just for the moment. And so we set sail to the sea on the back of a whale. And as we rocked, she would sing a song that was so comforting. She showed her heart to so many men, so many men she'll never see again. Just for the moment, just for the day, just for the moment. Oh, I trust you, my dear, to carry me home, carry me home. Oh, I trust you, my dear, to carry me home, carry me home. And so we set sail to the sea on the back of a whale. انساك يا بلادي يا بلادي عمري ما انساك يا بلادي يا بلادي يا بلادي يا بلادي يا بلادي ولكم
Well, welcome back. We have more stories for you this afternoon. And our first teller for this after the break is Laurie Hutchinson, and her story is called Fisherman's Delight. It's not going to be what you think, I don't think. Laurie tells me that she moved from Edmonton to Nanaimo about 20 years ago when her parents decided to move from a very small town and needed her help. She developed her own business and found a house way up on a hill with a view of the ocean. She had been writing personal stories for years, and she started telling stories, she says, at the age of 2 to strangers on trains. Then as she got older, to passengers on buses. But it was the birthday gift of a ticket to a storytelling performance by Melanie Ray of Tristan and Isolde that captured her heart and imagination. She was determined to do this too. She met Margaret Murphy, who said she would help Laurie tell if Laurie would help her start a storytelling group in Nanaimo. And so, 17 years ago, the two of them started up the Around Town Tellers, which is still going strong today. She says she is as happy to tell you a story today as she was when it all began.
Thank you, Lee. Hello, everyone. Am I good here? Oh, good. Well, my story today actually takes place in this region. It starts like this. Strictly Catholic, hide your body. Privacy is next to godliness. A belief passed down by my family, a belief I left home with, and a belief that I held on to for 37 years. Let's go back to 1960. My father was based in France. He was in the Air Force. And we were traveling for summer holidays. We pulled up to a big park in Stockholm, Sweden. Oh, and you could hear the giggles and laugh, and you could see water flying from a fountain. And it was quite a wall around it, so all you could see was their heads. And it was a hot, hot day. And my brother and I was 10 and my brother's 8, we want to go in there. And so each one of us took our turn in the back seat and got into our bathing suits. And over the wall we went. And we stood there. Oh my goodness, we were the only children there in a suit. Everyone there was totally naked, having a great time. You would think that I would have got the hint that skinny dipping was good, a good thing to do in life at that time. Well, it's 27 years later, 1987. Oh, I'm here from BC, and I'm with my friend Allison. She said, let's go to the fish quarry at 6 a.m. for a swim. I said, the fish quarry? Yep, the quarry, she said. I don't know if that was the real name of it or not, but the next morning, we loaded her old bicycle into the back of the station wagon, 6 a.m., and it was a strange weather. It's the end of June, Cowichan Bay. We're going up the hill in Cowichan Bay in the car. The windows are wide open. There's not a breath of air. No breeze. Warm, sunny, 6 a.m. Very strange for the Georgia Strait. Go along a country road and we hit a dead end and she said, out, you got to get out here. Getting the bicycle out. So she said, now you sit in the handlebars. I was a little thinner then. You sit on the handlebars and I'll pedal. Well, by the time I crawled on those handlebars and held on, I was giggling so hard, and it's a gravel road. And she's pedaling like mad down this gravel road, and we hit the quarry. She laid the bike down on the ground, and she peeled off all her clothes, folded them neatly, and put them on a flat rock and plopped her towel on the top. That wasn't me. Man, I had my bathing suit under my clothes. Oh, yeah. And I watched as she walked over and dove as far out as you could go, and her body just seemed to hover in the air. And the sun actually made her skin shimmer, and I don't even know how, because it wasn't wet. But it was like glass, and into the black water she went. Wow. I walked over to the edge, and I had peeled my clothes off because I wasn't changing out in the middle of nowhere. That wasn't me. And holy mackerel, there's a whole pile of rocks to get up. I'm thinking, how am I ever going to get up here? And I'm not diving off that, and I'm a good swimmer. So I took a few steps back and did a running leap. And into the water I went. That water was cold. Oh my gosh, I couldn't believe it. And I'm doing the backstroke down the water, and a hawk flies over me. Now this is heaven to me because I live in Edmonton, Alberta at the time. So being here in Cowichan Bay, on the water, doing the backstroke with a hawk going over, and I rolled on my side to do the side stroke, and there's two seagulls sitting there floating along beside me. Oh my gosh, am I in heaven? And then I heard the whistle. Oh, the whistle. I didn't want to go, but the whistle was the sign that we had to leave because she had to go to work. And so I saw her, and she's quite a bit ahead of me, heading back towards the towels. And at this time, the breeze is starting to come up, and the towels are blowing a little, and there's a plane coming across the sky. And I'm thinking, what's she going to do? There's a plane coming across, and she's going to clamber up there, naked? Anyways, not a thought in the world. Up those little rocks and jagged things she went, just like a monkey going up a tree. And I'm watching the plane going over. And by the time I got there, got to the top of the hill, the top of the cliff, she was lathering her body with body lotion. And of course, I grab my towel. I'm pretty shy, and I tie it here, and I'm getting my bathing suit off under my towel, and I'm trying to get clothes on over damp skin. And she says to me, "Would you like some body lotion?" I'm thinking, and before I could even answer her, she said to me, "Lori, I don't think I've ever told you this, but I lived in a log cabin in the center of BC. I owned a piece of property, quite a few acres of forest." And she said, "And every summer, when the warm weather came, I never wore clothes, ever, except to go to town." For a second, it took me back, and then I thought, wow, the freedom. She didn't worry if she was too saggy, or too skinny, or too fat, or too wrinkled, or too old, or too bare, or too cold. She was free. She was free. Now, the next morning, we did the same thing. She picked me up. The bike was in the back of the back of the car. Up the road we went, down the gravel road on the bicycle, giggling our heads off, going zigzag. Off she went into the air. This time, I had no bathing suit hiding under my clothes. All I had was the fear etched into my brain. I can remember that. I mean, let's face it. Sitting in your bathtub naked, with the door shut, is a far cry from standing on the side of a cliff, ready to plunge in, nude. I walked to the edge. I raised my arms, ready to dive in. I could feel the air tickling my armpits. Whew. And off I went into the cold water below. I don't think I'll ever forget that moment. Ever. That water, that cold water, was like an electric current on my body when I hit that water. There wasn't a spot on my body that wasn't covered in goosebumps. There's a freedom I don't even think a mother giving birth could have given me more freedom than the day that I landed in that water. And my body was just totally etched in liquid. I can remember a ripple, water going across my back, and it just caressed down my thighs and my stomach. It even went into those forbidden parts of you, under your breasts and between your buttocks. Oh, and then a plane came. Oh yeah, that wretched plane. And he's coming closer, and I could hear him, and I immediately flipped over. I mean, he can see my butt, but he's not seeing all of me. Over I went. Yeah, it was crazy. And then I heard the whistle again, and off we were, heading out. Now, I was 37 when I did that. And some people might say it took me a long time to get there. But my mother was 73 before it happened to her. Oh, yeah. She convinced Dad to go out in the middle of Kootenay Lake. They lived in Riandel at the time. They didn't have a very big boat, but they had just regular seats that just fold down that you could kind of sleep on. And she convinced him to take the sleeping bags out and go out and spend the night on the lake. and just anchor down. Well, my dad didn't think it was such a great idea to begin with, but, you know, he'll do anything my mother asks. So out they go. And of course when it got dark, it got dark. I don't know, have any of you been on Kootenai Lake in the dark? Man, there isn't a street light to be had for ever and ever. And she stands in the middle of the boat and strips off her clothes. Wally said to her, "Marion, what are you doing?" "We're going skinny dipping," she said. And he said, "We are absolutely not. It's dark and you are not going." And of course, my mother would never go skinny dipping when you could see her. Of course not. And over the boat she went. And of course he's saying, "Marion, Marion, where are you?" Not a sound. She knew if she said anything, he wouldn't get in the water. "Marion!" Finally, he jumped in the water, and she giggled and laughed, and she thought it was the best thing ever. You see, I was telling her about me getting in, and she's saying, "Oh, yeah, that was the best thing ever." And she told me the story. Now, a couple months later, I'm here, and it's coming to the end of August. Oh, man, I never, ever imagined that I would just jump out of bed to go dive into cold water at 6 a.m. every day. But that never, ever, the anticipation of that was amazing. And it was what do you call it? I knew we were coming to the end of the summer. And I got up out of the water that day. Wow. And it was like you're kind of sorry that summer's ending. There was that day on the water was strange, though. You know, at the quarry it was so quiet. Doesn't matter where you live, there's always a fire truck or a police or an ambulance going by, right? There's always a lawnmower going, or a mom yelling at their kids, or talking to their kids, or instructing their children, or dogs barking. That's life. But at the quarry, sometimes it was so quiet you could hear the dragonfly wings as they went over you on the water. And I often thought that there were times when you were standing up there lathering yourself with lotion, that there is a nothingness to the silence of a slug just going across a rock, right? It's just something that hits you when you're there in that quiet. Well, that day, out I got, and I'll tell you, not once did I ever get out when there was a plane going over. Never got past that. Out I am, and of course, I put my foot up on the rock, and I've got my leg extended like a ballerina on a bar, and I've got my hands full of lotion, and I'm just doing my thing. And I look up, and Allison's looking at me. "Laurie," and she's distressed, because she knows kind of my background. And she said, Laurie. I said, "What?" "I hate to tell you this," she said. And of course, I'm stretched out like this. "There's a fisherman about 20 feet behind you," she said. And at first I went, "Oh." And then there was a calm. I think for the first time in my life, I just liked myself as I was. And I giggled a little. And I continued to put the lotion on. We packed up our gear. And I turned. And I said, "Have a nice day," to the fisherman. And with the grin of a Cheshire cat, he replied back, "I already have." The end.
Thanks, Laurie. I was just thinking about these religious backgrounds and nudity, and I think, but what about all those pictures that we see in museums? Everybody's nude. Yeah. All right, Janos is going to be back again, and he has another story for us. It's called The Bear and the Djembe.
I think I'm giving myself away here this afternoon, because you'll realize that I do silly things more than once. And this is, but let's move continents. Let's come to Canada. All right, we've had enough of Africa. Let's come to the darkest Canada, above Thunder Bay. Now, if you set out from Thunder Bay, get a compass, go north. About 3.5 hours north, there's a village called Armstrong. That's the end of the road. There used to be an American base there when we had the global nuclear problem thinking, the Cold War. They were manning that base. And if you keep going, all we have is boreal forest, and then later on, tundra, and later on, snow, ice, and the North Pole. That's where we plant trees. But let me begin at the beginning. What happens is in winter, when all the ground is frozen and the caterpillar tracks of big machines can go anywhere, these machines come to northern Ontario. And they are huge. They got big engines. And they can grab trees, more than one at a time. And as they grab the trees, they cut them immediately and lay them down. And a fella buncher comes, and that one takes the tree and strips all the branches off and chops it to the right length. It takes seconds to do all of this. Now you can imagine what happens. These machines can work 24 hours a day. So in their cozy little cabins, the operator's probably got some music on and he's listening to some tunes. And at night, even at night, the big searchlights are out, lighting up the forest. And he goes along, grabbing trees, cutting, laying, grabbing, laying. And they create what we call a clear cut. Large areas of trees that have been felled, and all the debris is left there. So it looks like a war zone, truly does. And they're sitting there and the machines are going wild. There's noise and action. We, the tree planters, we're the good guys. We try to put right what they've taken off. And we go there a couple of years later. We go there in May, beginning of June, when the ground is thawed and when the geese are coming back to lay to their grounds. And it's actually wonderful to be in Thunder Bay in May, lie on the grass and watch the geese flying very low over, honking, to their breeding grounds. It's the beginning of the year for us, for planters. And planting starts early in the morning. About 5:30, it's time to wake up. And very often there's a pitter-patter of rain on your tent. And you have to shed your warm sleeping bag, which you don't really want to, and get out and breakfast 6:30. In the cook tent, and it's a wonderful breakfast and you make your sandwiches for lunch, and then the vans leave at 7:30 and take you out on the block. And when the tree runner brings you the trees and drops the trees, and the guy tells you your line, your block is from there to there, and away go the quad, and it's silence. All you have is the sun rising. You hear the birds, and you listen to your own breath as you're putting in trees. And then you may wonder, well, how long does it take to put a tree in? Well, you should do it every few seconds. What? 5, 7, 10 seconds is what you should do to get a tree in. And a good planter will easily plant 2,000 trees a day, 2 to 3,000, and on good ground you can go even higher. And you have these bags where you put the seedlings, you have a shovel, and that's what you do all day long, just looking for the next spot, putting a tree in, and it's really, really nice thing to do. And you get paid for it. And around 4 o'clock you go back to camp, and often on the way back you have these clear lakes that no one has swum in before, and we all strip off and we dive in and have a frolic in the water, cooling down, back to camp, dinner, usually the food is excellent, and then out come the guitars, the djembes, the instruments, all, and we light a fire, drink a couple of beers, and it's a beautiful lifestyle. When we go there in May, it's virgin forest. And what our job is to put our tents in the forest somewhere. And then we go along, and if you like to have an early morning swim, you go close to a lake that no one has swum in before. And then it's the tall black spruce, usually that's what we cut and that's what we plant. And then you have the various other trees, the cedar, the pin oaks, and so on, bushes. And then we have the ground cover. We got the Labrador tea and the lichen and the mosses and so on. And you find a place somewhere in the forest to put your tent. I have a 3-person tent. And then you find your spot, and I have an old curtain that I put on the ground so it's nice and cozy, and you lay your place out nicely because you're going to be there for a month and a half, 2 months. And this particular year I found a little orange crate which I put down with all my little things. I had a bear spray half used, and then all the things that you need, the shaver and flashlight and so on, and then my djembes there. And then as you go back to the cook tent, which is, of course, the center of everything, everyone goes backwards and forwards, you make these paths along the forest. So the people close to you make their path, and then it merges into a wider path. And so you got this sort of pathway going back to the cook tent. Now, one of the things you should not do when you're planting is put scent on. We don't eat bananas. We don't put scent or creams or lotions. Why? Because black flies and mosquitoes love this smelling stuff. Now, I told you tree planting was wonderful, and it is. But there are mosquitoes and black flies, and let me tell you, there are clouds of them. It can be hard. We plant when it's raining, snowing, hail. We don't stop planting. And the clouds of black flies follow you. In fact, the trick, if you're planting fast, is to be ahead of the black flies that are coming. If you can plant quicker than they can follow you, you're winning. And no sweet toothpaste, for instance. We keep by the cook tent. We brush our teeth at night, and there's a little locker that we put all this stuff in. As we come back to camp in the afternoon after our swim, what I forgot to tell you is that we actually have some soup and freshly baked bread. Can you believe it? A big pot of soup. Oh, it's so delicious. But at this camp, that particular year, it wasn't only soup and bread that was waiting for us. There was a bear. Now, you probably know all this, but there are 2 types of bears. There's, in Canada, there's the black bear, and then there's the brown bear, or the grizzly, as we call it. They're called grizzly because it had grizzly kind of fur. And the grizzly has shorter ears, and the claws on its feet and hands are longer and straighter. Not that we're going to go and check, what kind of bear? Show me your claws. But basically, there are these two bears, and what we see mostly in Northern Ontario are black bears. And one of the things that you should not do is make eye contact. So the thing is not to look at a bear. And you probably know all this. I'm telling you, you're Canadian. You will have this knowledge. But you know what they say? There's a little saying, and it goes, if it's brown, lay down. If it's black, fight back. If it's white, good night. So keep that in mind. But this black bear kept hanging around. We came back for soup and bread, and there was the stupid bear. Now, I say stupid because if it keeps hanging around, you know, it'll have to be shot. Because the chances of it encountering a planter gets higher and higher the more the bear gets used to us and the more we get used to the bear. So we used to pick up stones and throw it at it, you know, and it would hit its head, it would do, and it would wander off a few feet and come back and watch us again. And it was a real problem because very soon we'll have to call a ranger to shoot that poor animal. It was hungry, and the soup and the bread was so delicious. I can sympathize. And this one day we came back, and along these paths that we've created between the tents, someone shouts, "The bear's on the path." Okay, so now we walk more cautiously. And I get to my tent, and I open the flap, and there's my djembe. It's a drum, if you don't know what a djembe is, and it's got these claw marks through the skin of the drum. Well, I've just paid $30 to have it reskinned, and now it's ruined. I can't play it. And I've got a whole season ahead of me here. And so what am I going to do at night by the fire? And I'm really angry. And I have the bear spray. And then the shout along the path goes, "Oh, the bear's over here." And I think, I'm going to teach that bear a lesson. So I grab the spray. Now I think maybe some sort of prehistoric warrior spirit comes into me, you know, when we used to chase animals way back in whenever. And I got this spray and I started going down the path because I am angry. And I see the bear. And the bear sees me. Well, he's kind of surprised with me behind him, so he starts running. And I start running. And I try to spray, but it only goes about 8 feet. I don't quite reach him. So I go faster, and the bear goes faster. And next thing, we're running along this path. The bear's going, I'm going, and I'm trying to spray, and I'm really feeling very brave. Until the bear comes to this wide fork of the paths, and there's a tree. Now he goes up the tree. And if you think the bear climbs the same as humans, no. It's not like one leg, 1 foot, another leg. They go up the tree in seconds. It's and he's up the tree. And I get there, out of breath, triumphant. I chase the damn animal up the tree. I look up, he looks down, and then he or she, I don't know, realizes that they are trapped. And they roar. Now, have you heard of Darwin Award? It's an award that's given to someone who does something so stupid that they take themselves out of the gene pool before they can reproduce. And I think to myself, I was close to getting a Darwin Award then. And when this bear rolls down at me, I realize, no, this is not clever. And I go and run the other way as fast as I can back to my tent. But I don't feel a coward. I think I've saved my skin. But the story doesn't end there. The thing is, that bear, I was scared of the bear, but maybe the bear was a little scared of me because he didn't come back to the camp after that. So he didn't have to get shot. Thank you.
Well, it's nice to have a story where everyone survives. All right, well, except the drum, I guess. So, I have a story for you that comes from an American Irish teller named Maggie Kerr Pierce. And this story is called O'Hanlon and the Wee Fella. Now, back in 1609, I think it was, there was a, what you quite call it? They've got a name for it. But what happened was people like Redmond O'Hanlon, who was an aristocrat, was of the wrong religion from their perspective in Ireland, and so he was banished, as were others in that aristocracy. But he was not the type to obey this. He refused to go. But now he had to make a living. So what he became is a highwayman. And a very, very well-known highwayman as well. Now, there was quite a wealthy farmer who lived near Dundalk in Ireland, and he had a problem. His problem was that there was a merchant in Newry, County Down, who owed him a significant amount of money. Now, the problem wasn't that the merchant didn't want to pay. No, he would be happy to pay. The problem was that the farmer needed somebody to go and collect the money and bring it back. And he could not find anyone who would do this. And the reason for that was that this was an area of the countryside that was Redmond O'Hanlon's territory. So they were afraid that they would meet with him and they might well lose their lives, particularly if they didn't hand over whatever money they had quickly enough. So he fussed and he worried about this. What was he going to do? He couldn't find anybody who would make that journey and collect the money for him. So he eventually decided that he would do it himself. His wife got wind of that, and she was not pleased. She was furious with him, and she broke down in tears and said, "What is it? Your life isn't worth more than those sovereigns? You're going to go out there and make me a widow woman?" And he said, But what can I do? Who can I ask?" And then this little voice came from over by the fireplace. "Ask me. I'll go." And they looked, and there was this wee fella, about 9 years old, who was putting turf on the fireplace. Well, so the farmer began a conversation with this young fellow, and they decided that he would go and collect this debt, and the farmer would give him one of the gold sovereigns for his trouble. So he then offered the boy a gun and the fastest horse in the stable. Well, to his astonishment, the boy refused to take the gun. He says, "I have no use for firearms." And he didn't take the fastest horse at all. In fact, he picked an old, broken-down, spavined mare. Well, they saddled him up, and off the boy went. Now, it was a lovely day, and the boy was very excited and proud to be on this mission for his master. And the horse probably caught some of that spirit because she was clipping along at a brave pace. And they went along for some time until they came, they were getting close to the crossroads to Omeath. Now, what was a sunny day suddenly kind of darkened, and things did not look as cheerful as before. The countryside was more menacing, and the boy thought that he had now reached the countryside of Redmond O'Hanlon's, where he was doing his robbings. And then, at this crossroad, he began to hear clip, clop, clip, clop, clip, clop, clip, clop, and this horse came into view. It was a beautiful chestnut filly horse, and sitting on that horse was the handsomest, best-dressed man that this boy had ever seen. He had the bit and it's a bit? Whatever. Anyway, it shone in the sun, and he was wearing Spanish leather jacket. It was beautiful. His tall boots gleamed in the sun, and he had a feather in his hat. And as he approached the young fellow, he said, "Well, hello there, young fellow. What are you doing out here? Did you let go of your mammy's apron strings for a minute?" And then he roared this big belly laugh. And the boy was quite stung by this. "He doesn't know how important I am," thought the little boy. And he said, "No, by no means. No, I am out to lift a debt that's owed to my master in Nuri." "Well," said the handsome fellow, and that's what goes on here. He said, "Well then, how are you doing on this journey?" And the boy said, "Well, you know, there's nobody on this road. And I think this is the area where Redmond O'Hanlon does his robbings. And I'm a little bit afeared." Well, the handsome fellow on that beautiful filly let out another great bellow of a laugh. And he said, "Well, don't worry, young man. I'm sure I will see you later on the way back, and I'm sure that no evil will befall you." And then he slapped the old mare on the hip and sent her off running and said, "Well, we'll see you by and by, young man." And off he went. Well, the boy found his way to the businessman's place, and when he arrived, the fellow's wife gave the horse hay, and he gave the young boy a big mug of buttermilk and soda bread with freshly churned butter on it. The boy felt like it was the best meal he'd ever had. Meanwhile, the merchant went back into the room and to get the money. And by the time the boy had finished his meal, the merchant was back with a pouch with the coins in it. And he carefully counted out how many gold sovereigns there were. And the young fellow said that was exactly right. That was what he was expecting, what his master had told him would come. And then he said, "But I'd ask you now, sir, if you would take one of these sovereigns and give the equal value to me in copper coins." Now, the merchant was a little puzzled by this, but he didn't actually ask why, and he went back. And when he came back out, he had a sack full of these pennies and halfpennies and farthings, and gave it to the young man. The young man put the pouch with the gold sovereigns in under the saddle, and he tied the big one with the coppers on it to the pommel of the saddle, and he set off. And he was a happy young fellow. He had just had a really good meal, it was sunny again, and he had accomplished his mission. And so as he rode home, he came near to that crossroad again, just as the sun was starting to set. He went a little bit beyond that, and all of a sudden, out from the trees came this beautiful chestnut filly and a rider on it who looked remarkably like the man he'd met before, except he had a black mask on. So he could see the eyes, but nothing else of the face. However, you could still see the hat with a feather on it. And so he was facing Redmond O'Hanlon, who pointed a pistol at him and said, "Stand and deliver, your money or your life." And the young boy, looking down that long silver barrel, said, "By God, I've never handed over money before, and I'm never going to in my life." And he took that bag of the copper coins, and he threw it as far as he could into the trees. And O'Hanlon gave that great belly laugh again, and he said, "Well, let it never be said that I will not bow for it." And he leapt off his horse and went in to pick up the money. Well, the young fellow, quick as a wink, he grabbed the sack with the gold sovereigns in it, got off his mare, jumped on that beautiful filly, and took off, galloping down the road, leaving the highwayman with a sack of pennies and a broken-down old mare. Well, I don't need to tell you that when he got back to the farmer's place, he was treated as a hero. And the farmer, true to his word, gave him a gold sovereign and extra money to pay for that beautiful horse he'd brought home. Now, as to Redmond O'Hanlon, well, he steered clear of that area, and he was heard to say that if this is how a young'un, a little guy like that, a wee fellow would treat him, what would his elders do to him? And I'm proud to say we are within 1 minute of our time. Pretty slick, eh? Yeah. So thank you all for coming and listening to us and tuning in on us online. And we have, as I say, set a date for October. And I'm been discussing how we might start interest in storytelling here in Duncan with the library. And speaking to the adult librarian there, she thinks that she'll provide a room and help me set up. I'm thinking of 2 workshops. And my plan is a first workshop that will talk about storytelling generally. So you don't have to want to tell stories to come to this. Because it seems to me there's quite a lot you can find out about it. For example, what's the difference between a myth and a legend? Ponder that. Anyway, so hopefully we'll have something on the go, because I'll have to get some real storytellers, the people who give workshops and such, to come and help me out with this too. But I'm looking forward to meeting not only you guys there, because I'm sure you'd come, wouldn't you? And other people in the area who've dropped in and out. And who knows, it would be very nice to have a group here as well. Not but that the people who've come from north and south here haven't done a great job. I'm very grateful for them too, and I'm grateful for all of you who come and listen to what I love to do, as you could probably tell. So thank you again, and thanks to Ted, and thanks to Longevity John as well, and to all the tellers who've come this far, crafted their stories, and delivered them for us. Thank you.
Stories we have that we tell ourselves, stories that bend with time. Histories change like books on a shelf, pages that need